I love you.
Hello and welcome to a new reading vlog. So for this vlog, I decided let's read some short books because I love short books and I cannot lie. I really do. It just fills me with serotonin. Short books, short chapters. I love me a short king or queen in the literary world. But let me tell you about some of the books that I have already read to start off the month of September. It's spring, baby. I'm so happy. So, starting off with Colia by Michael Farrell. This is a book of poetry that is about the internet and the pleasure, satisfaction, joy, melancholy, anxiety, schadenfreude, boredom, and nausea it can give you. So I will just randomly select a page and read you a little snippet so you get an idea. With a good brush, you can lean in, barely moving the hand, crawling out of a jam sandwich, young Arthur's sticky hair, heritage or vocation, he is not looking idly out the window. Storytelling will accumulate in his young mind, but for now, impressions like a Van Gogh scuba dive won't go wasted. 15 is not the time for cricket or dating, but for painting. His toothbrush sticking out of his jeans in percipient fashion, rinsing it in a water can, is rather the habit of an older man. I didn't get this book. Dude, this did nothing for me. I felt nada, zilch, zip. It was very perplexing, I would say, and a bit abstract and all over the shop, I guess like the internet. But yeah, I normally go to poetry for the heart feels, and this did not knock on that door. It just was off in another universe entirely. So this was not to my taste, unfortunately. But if you like sort of nonsensical, kind of unsettling poems about God knows what, this might be up your alley. And then I picked up The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss. And wow, okay, so let me just start off. You have a main character who's very OCD coded. There is always the proper way to do things, or the proper place, or things must be done in threes. The way she thinks, because you're in her head, it is like someone who's had a head injury. They use words in very uncanny and odd ways. And I'm going to read a little excerpt out so you can understand what I mean with how the words are used and utilized. Ori puckered up and settled herself the rest of the way down. There was nothing peppermint about the cold stone edge. It was a dull, blunt bite against her tender, altogether hindmost self. That's just one example. There is no plot in this book. Basically, you are following a weird girl who is living like a lame Ninja Turtle Tinkerbell. So she lives underground in the sewers, and she collects lost things, and she makes soap, and she likes to kiss objects. And I read the whole thing and I could not see any point to it. So I decided to read the author's note, which I don't usually do. And the author is basically, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. My dude, what? What? Yeah, it was a very weird author's note, basically saying, I know that most people are going to hate this book and that shouldn't have been published. And I'm like, okay, so it's a cash grab? Is this a cash grab then? And I read some reviews, and I think the hardcore fans will stand anything this author writes, and then everybody else is like me, scratching their head going, what fuck was that? And I'm in the latter camp. It was not worth the time it took for me to read it. It took such a long time too, because you're in her world and her vernacular, and you feel like this is like Alice went down the rabbit hole and landed on her head. So that was my experience. If you really love this author and you just want anything that they create, then give it a read. Otherwise, I just definitely think this is one that you could probably skip a little bit and just continue on with the series it's in, which I believe this is part of the Kingkiller Chronicles, but it's just like a little thing about one particular character. But yeah, that was my experience, and I decided to give that book a 2 stars. And then I picked up Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, and I have read this back in my youth when I went through all of the classics. None of them are really listed on my Goodreads because it was pre-Goodreads. And so I thought, let me pick it up again and see what it's like, because I don't really remember it. I remember a little bit about it. There is something very memorable in this, and that is that you were following a son, and he's the breadwinner for his family. He works in a corporate job, sales, I think it was. And one day he wakes up as a beetle, which is a very memorable part of this book. And due to his beetle-like form, he can no longer work, and therefore his family must now take care of him. They're not happy about it. They resent it. They feel like he is a burden, and they basically wish for his death. And I can see how this book is meant to represent, work culture, capitalism, family dynamics, disability, and the whole thing. If you are not useful, then you are not of value to society. But this is just an incredibly depressing read, and it's very sad for Gregor, the man beetle, and it just makes me feel yuck, and I don't particularly love books that do that. Like the writing, I don't know, it's fine, I guess. It doesn't really do anything for me, and yeah, I think I recall feeling the same way at the end, just very upset and feeling a lot of anger on Gregor's behalf. And as someone who has members in her family that have to be cared for by others because of disability, I don't like it when I see people that are treated that way by their own family and are considered a burden. Yes, it's hard, it's difficult, it means that you have to sacrifice a lot. Like the act of a caregiver is no small thing. It is huge. And I don't think it is as highly valued by society as it should be. It should definitely earn more money. The government should pay a more than living wage to people that have to care for members of their family or members of society who cannot work and who cannot care for themselves. They still matter, but we know that's not the way the world works and the governments work. They don't really value the people who are disabled or the people really who care for them. So yeah, this just reminds me of that, and I hate reading about it. I hate seeing it. I hate seeing the neglect that this family heaped upon poor Gregor, who previously had been the one who was providing for them. So yes, it's like a bit of a salt in the wound book for me, and I've given it a 2.5 stars. I then picked up Woodworm by Leila Martinez. This is translated by Sophie Hughes and Annie McDermott. This is a horror book, and this is about generations of angry women who are stuck in a house filled with their hatred of the men whose bones it's built upon. There are themes of income inequality, domestic abuse, and feeling trapped. It was very fever dreamy. For me, it was told in the perspective of a grandmother and her granddaughter and their experiences and how they ended up there and how they feel like they don't have any control over their lives and the men who cause them pain and suffering. But yeah, it didn't do much for me. I didn't care about any of the characters in it, and normally I should care about a woman vexed by men. But in this one, I was like, oh, no. It was giving a particular episode of Angel with Cordelia when she first moves into her new apartment, and if you know, you know. So those were the vibes in this. But yeah, it wasn't particularly horrific either. It was just eerie and angry, and I gave it a 2.5 stars. I'd say read it if you do like generational stories about women who have been through it, who wish to escape the domination of the men in their life, haunted sentient houses, and vaguely ambiguous endings. And then I picked up The Pearl by John Steinbeck. So this is another classic. And look, this one's hard to review because I don't know how much of this is true to the original Mexican folklore tale it is based upon and how much is John's interpretation. So it's hard to rate, but basically this is about a man who lives with his wife and son. They are impoverished. He's a pearl diver. His son is bitten by a scorpion and needs medical care, and he finds a giant pearl and believes that that is their ticket to wealth and to freedom and to health and to opportunity. Things go awfully awry. So I can see how this book is meant to be an allegory for the greed of humans and wanting more than you have. But this is a family who had nothing. And this is where I don't agree. If you are in poverty and you are barely surviving and you are given the means and the opportunity to lift yourself out of poverty, I do not consider that greed. It's basic human rights. For me, this is more about the rich hoarding wealth, others being covetous and envious of what you have, and be careful who you trust. Those are the real lessons I would say are in this book. This book also features a lot of domestic abuse, misogyny, income disparity, racism and inequality. It was once again a really super depressing book. So I've given it a 3 stars. The enjoyment factor is not there. I'd say read it if you're a fan of John Steinbeck's romance writing, if you like books based on Mexican mythology, if you like a lot of violence and bleakness in your classics, then I'd recommend it for you. I'm now heading to the city because I'm doing the Metropolis bookstore thing, and then I'll be back and I'll probably read some more short books and tell you all about them. They got a little bit smooshed. Okay, I am back. I'm back from doing the Metropolis bookstore visit. Got a lot of great books, so you'll see that in an upcoming vlog. Now back to the short books that I read. The next book I picked up was The Glaciers by Alexis M. Smith. I love this cover. It works for me. This is a litfic book about a lovely lady who works at a library. So already you got me, bro. And she's basically someone who collects little pleasures. So if you like cracking creme brulees and dappled sunlight and the smell of books, this is for you. It's just the loveliest little story. So she's just going about her day, noticing all the things that bring her joy. And she's also quietly in love with one of her fellow librarians. And this book was like a warm hug to me. I savored it like a chamomile tea and absolutely enjoyed my time with it. I gave it a 4.5 stars. If you've always probably wondered what a day in the life of Miss Honey would be like had she had a happy, well-adjusted childhood, this is the book for you. And the last book I read, and my favorite of this reading vlog, is The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Core, and I ate this up. This is about a pair of monsters and their monstrous love. What a deliciously vicious romance. The main character is a mermaid, and the book opens up with her and her daughters feasting on the last remnants of the civilization that they literally devoured, men, women, and children. And then a plague doctor, Frankensteinian man-like creature, comes along and says to her, "Hey, I'm going to go on an adventure. Would you like to come along?" And she's like, "Sure, bruvs, no problem." And off they set, this unlikely duo, and they stumble across a town with very odd animalistic children and 3 violent saints. The writing in this is very flowery, but it was my kind of flowery, and I'll just read a little bit so you can see what I mean. Names are like selkie skins, often carelessly attended, left in view of those who would misuse them. Utilized correctly, though, they can kill a man, can turn a girl to a thing of teeth and dead eyes, an appetite to devour worlds, can make infernos of maidens, phoenixes of bones who have been asleep for so long they've forgotten the shape of rage. Names have so much power, enough even to hide a soul in the curl of a stranger's tongue. So I slurped this up and then picked up the bowl and swallowed the dregs. I loved this. I would read this if you enjoyed Nevo's The City in Glass, but also want something that has language that's a bit more accessible and 2 beings that are slightly more human. And I mean slightly. Don't expect humanity from these 2. Don't expect a typical romance. But I love this. This sung to me with its siren call. And I found my new favorite couple. My new favorite literary couple. The Murderer and the Murdered. So let me quickly summarize all of the books that I read in this short book vlog in the first vlog for September. I read Colia, which if I was going to rate it would probably be a 2 stars, but I don't rate poetry unless it's a 5. The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss, which I gave 2 stars. Woodworm by Leila Martinez, which I gave 2.5 stars. Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, which I gave 2.5 stars. The Pearl by John Steinbeck, which I gave 3 stars. Glaciers by Alexis M. Smith, which I gave 4.5 stars. And my favorite read, The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Core, which I gave 5 stars. So I've already gotten my first 5-star of the month. I'm pretty stoked. That was everything for this week. If you have a favorite short story that you love, please list it down below. Until next time, stay wild, Star Child.